Why some people go silent when they're hurt, the hidden psychology. No one talks about. Have you ever watched someone you love become completely silent after getting hurt? No shouting, no tears, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. And somehow, that silence hurts more than any argument ever could. Most people assume that when someone stops talking, they've stopped caring. They think silence is punishment, manipulation, or emotional distance. But what if the exact opposite is true? What if the person who says nothing is actually fighting the loudest battle inside their own mind? Today, we're going to uncover a psychological truth that changes the way you see quiet people forever. By the end of this video, you may realize that someone's silence was never rejection. It was a desperate attempt to survive emotions they couldn't put into words. Because sometimes the biggest scream is the one nobody hears. Imagine this. You're in the middle of an argument with someone you deeply care about. You explain your feelings, ask questions, maybe even raise your voice a little. Then suddenly they stop responding. They stare at the floor. They look away. They whisper, "I'm okay." But you know they're not. Minutes pass. Hours pass. Maybe even days. You begin to think they're ignoring you on purpose. You become frustrated. You push harder. Why won't you just talk to me? Ironically, that question often drives them even further away. The first thing we need to understand is this: silence is not always a decision. For many people, it's an automatic biological response. When emotional pain becomes overwhelming, the brain doesn't always prepare itself to communicate. Sometimes it prepares itself simply to survive. Think about your computer when too many programs are running at once. Eventually, everything freezes. The cursor won't move. The screen becomes unresponsive. The computer isn't broken. It's overloaded. Human emotions work in much the same way. When fear, disappointment, shame, sadness, and anxiety collide at the same time, the brain can temporarily lose access to the very systems responsible for language and clear thinking. The person isn't refusing to explain. They literally can't organize what they're feeling fast enough to speak. And yet, from the outside, all anyone sees is silence. This misunderstanding has destroyed countless friendships, marriages, and families. Because people judge what they can observe. They rarely consider what's happening beneath the surface. Here's the surprising part. The quietest people often have the loudest minds. While everyone else believes they've checked out emotionally, they're replaying every conversation over and over. Did I say the wrong thing? Maybe this is my fault. Should I apologize? Will speaking make everything worse? What if they leave me? What if I'm not enough? Their thoughts don't stop. They multiply. One painful memory triggers another. One mistake reminds them of 10 others. The silence you witness isn't emptiness. It's traffic. A highway packed with thousands of emotional vehicles trying to move at once but going nowhere. That's why asking them to just say something can feel impossible. Imagine standing in the middle of a hurricane while someone asks you to calmly read a poem. The problem isn't willingness. The problem is capacity. Interestingly, many of these patterns begin long before adulthood. As children, we naturally express everything. We cry when we're scared. We scream when we're angry. We run to someone when we need comfort. But life teaches lessons. Some children grow up hearing phrases like, "Stop crying. You're too sensitive. Big boys don't cry. You're overreacting. Go to your room until you calm down." Little by little, they learn that showing emotions creates rejection instead of safety. So they adapt. Instead of speaking, they swallow their feelings. Instead of asking for comfort, they hide. Instead of reaching out, they retreat. Years later, their body remembers the lesson even when their conscious mind doesn't. The silence that frustrates you today may actually be an old survival strategy created decades ago. And survival strategies are incredibly difficult to break. There's another reason people become quiet when hurt. Some have learned through painful experience that honesty can be dangerous. Maybe they trusted someone who mocked their vulnerability. Maybe every confession became ammunition during future arguments. Maybe every tear was called manipulation. Maybe every explanation was twisted against them. Eventually, the brain develops a simple equation. Talking equals pain. Silence equals protection. Once that belief takes root, staying quiet feels safer than taking the risk of being misunderstood again. From the outside, it appears cold. Inside, it's fear disguised as control. But perhaps the most fascinating truth is that not everyone processes emotions in the same way. Some people think by speaking. You've probably met them. The more they talk, the clearer their feelings become. Conversation helps them organize chaos. Then there are internal processors. These individuals need solitude before they understand what they actually feel. For them, words come after reflection, not before. If you pressure an internal processor to explain themselves immediately, you're asking them to provide answers before their own mind has finished asking the questions. That pressure doesn't speed up understanding. It delays it. And this creates one of the most painful cycles in relationships. One person chases. The other withdraws. The more one pursues, the more the other disappears. Neither intends to hurt the other. Both are simply trying to feel safe. Unfortunately, they end up triggering each other's deepest fears. One fears abandonment. The other fears emotional overwhelm. Without realizing it, they become trapped in a dance where every step pushes them farther apart. And here's what almost nobody notices. While they appear calm on the outside, many silent people are actually protecting the relationship itself. They know that if they speak while flooded with emotion, the words that come out may be cruel, unfair, or impossible to take back. So instead, they choose restraint, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of love. Sometimes it's love trying desperately not to become destruction. The tragedy is that most people misread this completely. When someone goes quiet, their partner often feels abandoned. When their partner pushes for answers, the quiet person feels attacked. Neither side is trying to create distance. Yet distance grows anyway. And over time, silence becomes a wall instead of a shield. But what if there was another way? What if understanding the psychology behind silence could transform conflict into connection? The first step is surprisingly simple. Stop assuming that immediate communication is always healthy. Modern culture celebrates instant responses. Reply immediately. Solve problems immediately. Express your feelings immediately. But human beings are not machines. Some hearts need time before they can tell the truth. In fact, forcing someone to speak before they're emotionally ready often produces words they don't actually mean. Out of pressure, they may say, "Fine," or "whatever," or "I don't care." Not because those words are true, but because escaping the pressure becomes more important than expressing reality. Ironically, the conversation ends with less honesty than if they had simply been allowed to stay silent for a while. Think of emotional pain like muddy water inside a glass. If you keep shaking the glass, the water stays cloudy. Only when everything is left undisturbed does the dirt slowly settle, allowing clarity to return. Many quiet people aren't avoiding the conversation. They're waiting for the water to clear. This is why one of the greatest gifts you can offer someone who withdraws is emotional permission. Permission to breathe. Permission to think. Permission to return when they're ready. A simple sentence like, "I can see you're overwhelmed. Take the time you need. I'll still be here when you're ready," can accomplish far more than an hour of questioning. Because safety opens doors that pressure can never unlock. Interestingly, neuroscience suggests that people don't calm down because they're told to calm down. They calm down because another nervous system helps regulate their own. Your patience becomes evidence that the relationship is safe. Your consistency tells their subconscious, "I won't punish you for needing space." And slowly, something remarkable happens. The walls begin to lower. The frozen mind starts reconnecting with language. The person who couldn't find a single sentence suddenly begins explaining thoughts they've been carrying for years. Not because they were forced, because they finally felt safe enough. But this message isn't only for those trying to understand quiet people. It's also for those who recognize themselves in this story. If you disappear every time you're hurt, ask yourself an honest question. Is your silence protecting you or isolating you? There comes a point where self-protection quietly transforms into self-sabotage. The people who love you cannot read your mind. Even if they desperately want to help, they often have no idea whether you're angry, exhausted, frightened, or simply overwhelmed. The solution doesn't require sharing every emotion immediately. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence. I need some time, but I'm not leaving. Those 8 words can prevent days of misunderstanding. They reassure the other person while giving yourself permission to process your emotions at your own pace. Healthy communication isn't about speaking constantly. It's about creating bridges even during silence. And perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding of all. Quiet people aren't emotionally empty. Many of them feel everything more intensely than anyone realizes. They notice tiny changes in tone. Small disappointments linger for weeks. They remember conversations from years ago. They replay facial expressions. They analyze pauses. Their emotional world is incredibly rich. But because so much happens internally, very little appears externally. People mistake restraint for indifference, when in reality, restraint often comes from extraordinary sensitivity. In a world where reactions happen instantly, quiet people often choose reflection. They think before accusing. They consider consequences before speaking. And when they finally tell you that you've hurt them, chances are they've spent countless hours trying to convince themselves you didn't. Likewise, when they tell you they appreciate you, those words carry enormous weight. They are not casual compliments. They are conclusions reached after deep consideration. That's why understanding silence changes everything. You stop asking, why won't they talk? And start asking, what are they carrying that feels too heavy to say? That single shift can transform resentment into compassion. It can save friendships that seemed impossible to repair. It can strengthen marriages standing on the edge. It can help parents understand children who retreat instead of rebel. Most importantly, it reminds us that every person fights invisible battles. Some people cry loudly. Some people argue. Some people run away. And some become completely silent. None of these reactions automatically reveal the size of their pain, because pain doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it sits quietly across the room, hoping someone will stay without demanding explanations. So the next time someone falls silent after being hurt, don't rush to fill the space. Listen to it. Respect it. Allow it to exist. You may discover that beneath those quiet moments is a person waiting not for perfect words, but for proof that they are still safe enough to be understood. And if you've spent years believing your own silence makes you weak, difficult, or impossible to love, remember this. Your need for time doesn't make your feelings less valid. Your quiet doesn't mean your heart is empty. It simply means your emotions travel a different road before they reach your voice. The world often celebrates those who speak first. But sometimes, the people who say the least have spent the longest learning the value of every word. If this story helped you see yourself, or someone you love, in a new light, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us. When you're deeply hurt, do you become louder or quieter? Your experience might help another person finally feel understood. And if you'd like to explore more hidden truths about human psychology, relationships, and emotional healing, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, understanding another person's silence is the first step toward hearing the words they've been trying to say all along.